2 hours ago, the Middle East entered what analysts are already calling the most dangerous 48-hour window since the 2006 Lebanon War. The chain of events unfolding across Tehran, Tel Aviv, Baghdad, and the Persian Gulf is not a single crisis. It is 4 simultaneous crises feeding into each other, and the fuse on all of them is burning at the same time. Let's start with what happened in Tehran this morning. Israel announced the targeted killing of Iranian intelligence minister Ismail Khatib in an airstrike in Tehran. This was not an isolated strike. It came just days after Israel confirmed the killing of Ali Larakani, the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and Gholam Reza Soleimani, a senior commander of the Basij paramilitary force. 3 of Iran's most powerful men eliminated in rapid succession. The scale of these eliminations is unprecedented. Iran has spent decades building layers of security around its leadership. The fact that Israel has now reached inside Tehran itself, not just in Syria, not just in Lebanon, but in the Iranian capital, represents a strategic rupture in the very concept of Iranian leadership security. Iran's response came before dawn. In the early morning hours, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a coordinated wave of ballistic missiles and Shahed series drones toward Israeli territory. Israeli air defense systems, backed by American naval assets in the eastern Mediterranean, intercepted the majority of the incoming projectiles. However, 2 people were killed near Tel Aviv, and damage was reported in several locations across central and northern Israel. Iranian state media framed the strike as the opening move of a sworn retaliatory campaign in response to the assassination of Larakani. Supreme Leader Khamenei's office issued a statement declaring that the enemies of Iran will see consequences beyond their calculation. That phrase, beyond their calculation, has appeared twice now in official Iranian communications. Intelligence analysts read it as a signal that Iran is not done, and that the retaliation will not follow conventional patterns. The Gulf dimension of this crisis is what is most alarming energy markets and Washington's strategic planners simultaneously. Iran issued a formal warning that Gulf oil infrastructure could be targeted within hours. Both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait confirmed that drones and missiles entered their respective airspace and were intercepted. This means Iran's reach is not limited to Israel. The warning sent to Gulf states is clear. If the confrontation escalates, no one in the region is insulated from the fallout. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of the world's traded oil passes every day, is now under what shipping insurers are calling an active threat environment. Lloyd's of London war risk premiums for vessels transiting the Persian Gulf spiked within hours of the Iranian warning. Now overlay that with President Trump's statement on Truth Social, published in the past 24 hours. Trump wrote that if the regime in Iran collapses, the security of the Strait of Hormuz should be the responsibility of the nations that use it, not the United States. He added that this approach would quickly activate allies who have so far failed to act. The statement is significant for several reasons. First, it signals that the White House is already thinking about a post-regime change scenario in Iran, at a moment when active strikes and counterstrikes are occurring. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it reveals an ongoing frustration between Washington and its European allies over burden sharing in the Gulf. American officials have been pushing for Allied naval escorts for oil tankers transiting the strait. European capitals have declined, arguing that entering an active conflict zone is not a step they are prepared to take while fighting is ongoing. Many of those same European governments have privately indicated they would consider joining a multinational maritime patrol force once active hostilities cease. But Washington is not satisfied with that timeline. Trump's public post is effectively an ultimatum wrapped in a rhetorical question. If you want the oil, you secure the road, or we walk away. The implications of a partial or complete American withdrawal from Strait of Hormuz security operations would be felt globally within hours. Japan imports approximately 90% of its oil through that waterway. South Korea, India, China, the entire industrial base of Asia, depends on uninterrupted passage through 21 nautical miles of Iranian-adjacent water. Any serious disruption to tanker traffic would trigger an immediate supply shock. Brent crude, which was already elevated due to regional tensions, would likely test the $120 to $130 per barrel range within days of a confirmed closure. The International Energy Agency has emergency reserves protocols, but those are designed to buffer disruptions measured in weeks, not to absorb a prolonged strategic blockage of the world's most critical oil choke point. The Baghdad dimension adds another layer of direct American exposure to this conflict. A drone struck near the perimeter of the United States Embassy compound in Baghdad. No casualties were reported, and American officials have not yet formally attributed the attack. However, the pattern is consistent with previous operations by Iran-aligned militia groups in Iraq, who have struck at American facilities multiple times during periods of elevated regional tension. The significance here is not the damage, it is the message. Iranian proxies in Iraq are signaling that American assets in the broader region are valid targets if the United States continues to support Israeli operations. The embassy in Baghdad sits at the intersection of American diplomatic presence and Iranian proxy network activity. An attack there, even one without casualties, is a direct communication from Tehran to Washington. Your footprint in the region is not safe. What makes this particular moment different from previous cycles of escalation between Israel and Iran is the convergence of multiple pressure points. In April 2024, when Iran launched its first ever direct missile and drone assault on Israeli territory, there was a clear sequence: provocation, retaliation, de-escalation. The international community, including the United States, Jordan, and several Arab states, worked together to intercept Iranian projectiles and then immediately moved to prevent Israeli counter-escalation. That circuit breaker appears to be absent or weakened this time. The assassination of multiple senior Iranian officials, including the head of national intelligence, removes the very individuals who would typically manage back-channel de-escalation efforts. You cannot negotiate with intelligence chiefs who no longer exist. You cannot send messages through Security Council secretaries who have been eliminated. Israel has, whether deliberately or as a side effect, decapitated the Iranian leadership structure that historically managed the red lines of direct confrontation. Iran, for its part, is under enormous internal pressure. The legitimacy of the Islamic Republic has rested in part on the narrative of strategic deterrence. The idea that the regime's enemies pay a price for aggression. The killing of Larikani, then Soleimani, then Khatib in rapid sequence, inside Iran's own borders, challenges that narrative at its foundation. If Iran does not respond in a way that is visible and painful to its adversaries, the domestic political cost to the regime is severe. That dynamic, the regime's need to demonstrate credibility to its own base, is driving escalatory choices that Tehran might otherwise try to avoid. The morning missile and drone barrage on Israel was not purely a military decision. It was a political performance for an Iranian domestic audience, watching to see if their leadership still controls the terms of conflict. The United States sits at an uncomfortable intersection of all these vectors. American naval and air defense assets in the region are actively participating in the defense of Israel against Iranian fire. American diplomatic presence in Iraq is within range of Iranian proxy networks. American economic interests are directly tied to the stability of Persian Gulf shipping routes, and the American president is publicly musing about withdrawing from Strait of Hormuz security responsibilities at the exact moment those responsibilities are most consequential. The strategic incoherence of that combination, more military involvement and less strategic commitment simultaneously, is not lost on regional actors. Gulf states, which have been quietly normalizing relations with Israel under American encouragement, are now watching to see whether the American security umbrella is real or rhetorical. European allies are navigating an equally uncomfortable position. They depend on Gulf oil, they share intelligence frameworks with both the United States and Israel, and they are being explicitly pressured by Washington to take on military burden sharing in an active conflict zone. Most European governments are constitutionally and politically constrained from deploying naval forces into active combat environments without explicit parliamentary authorization. The suggestion that they should escort oil tankers through a strait where Iran has both the capability and the stated willingness to target maritime traffic is, from their perspective, an invitation to open-ended military commitment that their populations have not consented to. What the next 48 hours look like depends on several variables that are genuinely unknown. Whether Iran conducts a second larger wave of strikes against Israel, whether Israeli ground or air forces conduct additional strikes inside Iranian territory, whether any Gulf state oil infrastructure is actually hit and how severely, whether proxy groups in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, or Lebanon move from low-level harassment to more significant attacks on American or allied targets, and critically, whether any diplomatic backchannel through Qatar, Oman, Turkey, or indirectly through European intermediaries manages to create a pause in the cycle before it becomes self-reinforcing. The Strait of Hormuz is not closed. Oil tankers are still moving. The embassy in Baghdad is still standing. Israel's air defenses intercepted most of what Iran fired. But the architecture of deterrence that prevented direct Iran-Israel exchanges for 4 decades is under severe structural stress. The people who managed that architecture on the Iranian side are being systematically eliminated. The American administration is publicly questioning its own commitments in the region. And the strikes are no longer theoretical or symbolic. They are killing people, including senior government officials, in capital cities. The Middle East has not yet reached the point of no return, but the distance to that point has never been shorter.